Sarah Martinez had always preferred the shadows. At 28, she moved through the USS Valiant's ammunition storage bay with practiced efficiency, her calloused hands expertly organizing shells and cartridges that could level entire city blocks. The other sailors barely noticed her, just another crew member doing her job, keeping her head down, staying invisible. That's exactly how she wanted it. The morning sun cast long shadows through the ship's corridors as Sarah began her daily routine. She arrived at the ammunition bay before anyone else, just as she had for the past 18 months. The familiar smell of gun oil and metal filled her nostrils as she checked inventory sheets against the actual supplies. Each bullet, each shell, each explosive device was accounted for with meticulous precision. "Morning, Martinez," called out Petty Officer Johnson as he passed by the entrance. Sarah nodded politely but didn't engage in conversation. She had learned that the less people knew about her, the better. Questions led to curiosity, and curiosity led to problems she wasn't ready to face. As she worked, Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to her chest, pressing against something hidden beneath her Navy-issued shirt. The small, hard outline of metal against her skin served as a constant reminder of a life she had tried to leave behind. Sometimes, late at night in her bunk, she would trace its edges with her fingers and remember faces she wished she could forget. The ammunition bay was her sanctuary. Here, among the organized chaos of military ordnance, she felt a strange sense of peace. The work required focus and attention to detail, qualities that helped keep her mind occupied and away from darker thoughts. She had become an expert at cataloging different types of ammunition, understanding their purposes, their destructive capabilities. It was knowledge that came easier to her than it should have for someone with her official background. Other crew members often commented on how quickly she had learned the ropes. Natural talent, they would say, not knowing how close to the truth they were. Sarah would smile and deflect the praise, always steering conversations back to work or weather or anything that didn't involve personal questions. The ship's routine was predictable, and Sarah found comfort in predictability. Morning inventory, afternoon maintenance, evening reports. She ate her meals quietly in the corner of the mess hall, reading technical manuals or staring out at the endless ocean. She had no close friends aboard the Valiant, no one who might notice inconsistencies in her stories or ask too many questions about her past. But isolation came with its own price. Sometimes watching the younger sailors laugh and share stories, Sarah felt a deep loneliness that seemed to echo in her chest. She wondered what it would be like to have friends again, to trust someone enough to share the truth about who she really was and what she had done before joining the Navy. During quiet moments when the ammunition bay was empty except for her, Sarah would allow herself to remember. Images would flash through her mind, desert landscapes, the weight of different weapons in her hands, the faces of people she had served alongside in places that didn't officially exist on any map. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, a different person who had made different choices. The metal hidden beneath her shirt seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. It represented honor and sacrifice, courage under fire and lives saved. But it also represented questions she couldn't answer, not without revealing secrets that were supposed to stay buried. So she kept it close to her heart, a reminder of who she used to be, even as she tried to become someone new. As the day wore on, Sarah noticed increased activity throughout the ship. More officers than usual were walking through the corridors, their expressions serious and focused. She overheard fragments of conversations about inspections and visiting dignitaries, but didn't pay much attention. High-ranking visits were common enough in the Navy, and they rarely affected her daily routine. She finished organizing the last batch of artillery shells just as the evening shift was beginning. The familiar ache in her shoulders told her it had been a long day, but it was good, honest work. As she prepared to leave the ammunition bay, Sarah paused at the entrance and looked back at the neat rows of organized supplies. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same routine, the same careful invisibility. Walking through the ship's corridors toward her quarters, Sarah passed groups of sailors discussing the upcoming inspection. She caught mentions of an Admiral coming aboard, Someone important enough to have the entire crew on edge. Sarah quickened her pace, eager to reach the solitude of her bunk where she could let her guard down, if only for a few hours. In her small quarters, Sarah sat on the edge of her narrow bed and carefully removed her shirt. The metal fell free, catching the dim light from the overhead bulb. She held it in her palm, feeling its familiar weight, reading the inscription she had memorized long ago. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember the day she had earned it, the pride she had felt, the sense of purpose that had driven her through impossible circumstances. But that was before everything had changed, before the mission that had ended her military career and forced her to disappear into civilian life. The Navy had offered her a second chance, a new identity, a fresh start. All she had to do was leave her past behind and never look back. It had seemed like the perfect solution at the time. Now, as she prepared for another night of restless sleep, Sarah wondered how much longer she could maintain this carefully constructed life. The metal felt like a time bomb against her chest, waiting for the right moment to explode and reveal all the secrets she had worked so hard to hide. The USS Valiant buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral Rebecca Thompson stepped aboard. Her reputation preceded her, a decorated combat veteran with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind for details that others missed. She had earned her rank through decisive action in 3 different conflicts, and every sailor on the ship knew that nothing escaped her notice during inspections. Sarah felt the change in atmosphere immediately as she entered the ammunition bay that morning. The usual relaxed chatter among crew members had been replaced by crisp professional exchanges. Everyone was on their best behavior, uniforms pressed to perfection, boots polished to mirror shine. She adjusted her own appearance, making sure her shirt was properly tucked and her hair secured according to regulations. "Martinez, you're going to have company today," announced Chief Petty Officer Williams as he conducted his morning rounds. "The Admiral wants a complete walkthrough of all weapons systems and storage facilities. Make sure everything is spotless and properly documented." Sarah's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Yes, Chief. Everything's already in order, but I'll double-check all the inventory logs." As Williams moved on to brief other crew members, Sarah found herself unconsciously touching her chest again. The metal seemed to pulse against her skin like a second heartbeat. She forced herself to focus on the task at hand, reviewing supply manifests and ensuring that every piece of equipment was properly secured and labeled. The hours passed slowly as the inspection team made their way through different sections of the ship. Sarah could hear their approach long before they reached the ammunition bay, the sound of multiple sets of boots moving in formation, the crisp responses of crew members answering questions, the Admiral's distinctive voice cutting. Through the maritime din, Admiral Thompson's voice carried authority without needing to be raised. Sarah had heard stories about her from other sailors who had served on ships she had previously inspected. She was thorough, demanding, but fair. She remembered names and faces, asked follow-up questions months later about conversations she had months ago. Most importantly, she had an uncanny ability to spot things that didn't belong. When the inspection team finally reached the ammunition bay, Sarah stood at attention beside her carefully organized workspace. The Admiral entered first, her keen eyes immediately scanning the storage area with practiced efficiency. She was smaller than Sarah had expected, but her presence filled the room completely. "Chief Williams, introduce me to your ammunition specialist," Admiral Thompson said, her gaze settling on Sarah. "Admiral, this is Petty Officer Martinez. She's been managing our ordnance storage for the past 18 months. Outstanding record, excellent attention to detail." Admiral Thompson approached Sarah with measured steps, her experienced eyes taking in everything: posture, uniform condition, the way Sarah held herself under scrutiny. "At ease, Petty Officer Martinez. Tell me about your background. Where did you train for ordnance management?" Sarah had rehearsed this conversation countless times in her mind. "Great Lakes Naval Station, Admiral. Basic training followed by specialized ammunition handling certification. I also completed additional safety protocols training before being assigned to the Valiant." "Impressive efficiency here," the Admiral noted, gesturing toward the meticulously organized storage racks. "How long does it typically take you to complete daily inventory?" Approximately 2 hours for full inventory, Admiral. I also conduct spot checks throughout the day to ensure security protocols are maintained. As they talked, Admiral Thompson moved closer, ostensibly examining the ammunition storage systems but actually studying Sarah more carefully. There was something about the young petty officer that seemed familiar, though she couldn't immediately place what it was. The way Sarah held herself suggested military experience that went deeper than standard Navy training. "Have we met before, Martinez?" the Admiral asked suddenly, her sharp gaze focused intently on Sarah's face. Sarah's heart rate spiked, but her training kept her expression composed. "No, Admiral. I don't believe we have." Admiral Thompson continued her inspection, but Sarah could feel those penetrating eyes returning to her frequently. The Admiral asked technical questions about different types of ammunition, storage, requirements, safety procedures. Sarah answered each query with professional competence, demonstrating knowledge that impressed even the experienced officers accompanying the inspection team. But as the inspection continued, a small accident changed everything. While demonstrating the proper handling procedure for a particular type of shell, Sarah's sleeve caught on a storage rack. The fabric pulled tight across her chest, and for just a moment, the outline of something small and hard became visible beneath her shirt. Admiral Thompson's eyes immediately fixed on that spot. Years of military experience had taught her to recognize the distinctive shape and size of military decorations, even when they were concealed. Her expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight narrowing of her eyes, the way her attention suddenly became laser-focused. "That will be all for now, Martinez," the Admiral said, her tone remaining professional but with an undertone that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Continue with your excellent work." As the inspection team prepared to leave the ammunition bay, Admiral Thompson lingered for a moment, her gaze lingering on Sarah with unmistakable interest. "Chief Williams, I'd like to review Martinez's personnel file later today. Standard procedure for all key personnel." After they left, Sarah stood alone among the ammunition racks, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline wore off. She knew that look in the Admiral's eyes. It was the look of someone who had seen something that didn't quite fit, someone who would not rest until she had answers. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of anxiety and careful routine. Every time someone approached the ammunition bay, Sarah's pulse quickened, expecting to see the Admiral returning with more questions. She went through the motions of her work, but her mind was racing through possible scenarios, potential escape routes, ways to explain what couldn't be explained. That evening, as Sarah sat in the mess hall picking at her dinner, she overheard fragments of conversation from other crew members about the inspection. The Admiral had been thorough but complimentary, impressed with the overall readiness of the ship. But Sarah noticed that several people mentioned how the Admiral had spent extra time reviewing personnel files with the ship's executive officer. After dinner, Sarah retreated to her quarters and sat on her bunk staring at the small space that had been her sanctuary for 18 months. Everything she had built here, the routine, the anonymity, the chance at a normal life, suddenly felt as fragile as tissue paper. The metal against her chest seemed to burn now, a branded reminder of secrets that were supposed to stay buried forever. She pulled out the metal and held it up to the light, reading the inscription that she knew by heart. It represented the best and worst moment of her life, a decoration earned through actions that had saved dozens of lives, but had also ended her career in special operations. The medal was proof of who she really was, evidence of a past that could destroy the carefully constructed identity she had spent months building. As Sarah prepared for what might be her last night aboard the USS Valiant, she wondered if she should disappear again, slip away in the night, as she had been trained to do, but something held her back. A stubborn pride that refused to let her run anymore, and a growing realization that perhaps it was time to stop hiding from who she really was. Admiral Thompson sat in the ship's communications center at 300 hours, long after most of the crew had retired to their quarters. The secure terminal glowed softly in the darkened room as she accessed classified personnel databases that few people had clearance to view. The name Sarah Martinez yielded standard Navy records, enlistment date, training completion, assignment history. Everything appeared normal, routine, Exactly what one would expect for a competent petty officer, with 18 months of service. But Admiral Thompson hadn't reached her current rank by accepting things at face value. Something about Martinez bothered her, a nagging sense of recognition that she couldn't shake. The way the young woman carried herself, the depth of knowledge she demonstrated about ordnance handling, the quick, decisive movements that spoke of training beyond standard Navy protocol. It all added up to someone with secrets. She expanded her search parameters, diving into classified special operations databases. The process was slow and methodical, cross-referencing facial recognition software with archived mission photographs and personnel files from various Black Ops units. Admiral Thompson had participated in enough covert operations during her career to know how thoroughly someone could disappear from official records if necessary. 3 hours later, she found what she was looking for. The photograph was several years old, showing a woman in desert camouflage with shorter hair and a harder expression, but the bone structure was unmistakable. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, formerly of the Army's most classified Special Operations Unit. The file contained mission summaries that made Admiral Thompson's breath catch. Operations in places that didn't exist on public maps, actions taken in defense of American interests that would never be acknowledged publicly. But it was the final entry in Elena Vasquez's file that made everything clear. The operation had gone wrong in ways that still haunted intelligence communities. Vasquez had been forced to make an impossible choice between following orders and saving civilian lives. She had chosen to save the civilians, directly disobeying commands and compromising the mission. The action had earned her the Medal of Honor in a secret ceremony, but it had also ended her military career and put her life in danger from enemies who wanted revenge. The official story was that Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had died in the operation. Her death had been faked, her identity erased, and she had been given the chance to disappear completely. Admiral Thompson now understood why Sarah Martinez seemed so familiar. She was looking at a ghost, someone who was supposed to be dead, but had instead chosen to serve again under a new name. The next morning brought Sarah's worst fears to reality. She was summoned to the Admiral's temporary office immediately after completing her morning inventory. The walk through the ship's corridors felt like a death march, each step bringing her closer to the end of the life she had carefully constructed. Admiral Thompson was waiting alone. Sarah's personnel file spread across the desk alongside several other documents that Sarah couldn't identify from her position. The Admiral's expression was unreadable as she gestured for Sarah to take a seat. "Close the door, Martinez," Admiral Thompson said quietly. "We need to have a conversation." Sarah complied, her military training keeping her movements steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She sat at attention, hands placed precisely on her knees, eyes focused straight ahead. "I've been reviewing your file," the Admiral began, tapping the folder with one finger. "Interesting reading. Joined the Navy 18 months ago with no prior military experience, yet you demonstrate knowledge and skills that suggest otherwise." Sarah remained silent, knowing that anything she said could make the situation worse. Admiral Thompson leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah's face carefully. "I also spent some time last night reviewing other files, Martinez. Or should I say Staff Sergeant Vasquez?" The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. After months of being Sarah Martinez, hearing her real name spoken aloud felt surreal and terrifying. Her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, just enough for the Admiral to notice. "The Medal of Honor is a significant decoration, Elena," Admiral Thompson continued, using her real name deliberately. "It's not something you typically hide under a Navy uniform. Most people who earn it wear it with pride." "Permission to speak?" "Freely, Admiral?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Granted." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine her future. "That person doesn't exist anymore, Admiral. Elena Vasquez died in Afghanistan, just like the official records say. I'm Sarah Martinez now, and I'd like to keep it that way." Admiral Thompson nodded slowly. "I understand the desire for a fresh start, believe me. But hiding who you are doesn't make the past disappear. It just makes it harder to deal with when it finally catches up." The past already caught up, Sarah replied with bitter honesty. That's why Elena Vasquez had to die. There are people who want revenge for the choices she made, even though those choices saved dozens of innocent lives. Staying dead keeps everyone safer. The Admiral stood and walked to the small porthole, gazing out at the ocean beyond. I've read the classified reports about that operation. What you did, what Elena did, was exactly what any decent human being would have done in that situation. The fact that it conflicted with orders doesn't diminish the heroism involved. It ended careers and compromised national security, Sarah countered. The Medal of Honor ceremony had 3 people in attendance, and I was sworn to never speak about it to anyone. That medal isn't a source of pride, it's evidence of the worst day of my life. Admiral Thompson turned back to face her. Yet you kept it. After everything that happened, after faking your death and starting over, you still carry it with you. Why? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Because forgetting who I was would dishonor the people who died that day. The medal reminds me why I made the choices I did, even if I can never talk about them. The people you saved, do they know what you sacrificed for them? They can never know. That was part of the deal. Complete anonymity in exchange for their safety and mine. Admiral Thompson returned to her seat, her expression thoughtful. So you joined the Navy under false pretenses to serve your country again, knowing you could never receive recognition for your previous service. I joined because I couldn't figure out how to be a civilian, Sarah admitted. Military service is all I know. The Navy offered structure and purpose without the complications of my past. At least, that's what I thought. And now? Sarah met the Admiral's eyes directly. Now I suppose my time as Sarah Martinez is over. I can disappear again, find another identity, start over somewhere else. I've gotten good at running. Admiral Thompson shook her head firmly. Running isn't always the answer, Elena. Sometimes the best way forward is to stop hiding and face the truth, even when it's complicated. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I'm suggesting that the Navy needs people like you. People with real experience, genuine courage, and the wisdom that comes from making hard choices under impossible circumstances. But we need all of you, not just the sanitized version you've been presenting. Sarah felt a glimmer of something she hadn't experienced in years, hope. But she pushed it down, knowing that hope could be dangerous. The risks haven't changed. There are still people who want Elena Vasquez dead. Then maybe it's time to make sure Elena Vasquez isn't an easy target anymore, the Admiral replied with a slight smile. The Navy has ways of protecting valuable assets, and you're definitely valuable. As their conversation continued, Sarah found herself facing a choice she hadn't expected to have. She could continue running, continue hiding, continue living as someone she wasn't. Or she could trust this Admiral with the truth and see if there might be another way forward, one that didn't require her to abandon everything she had worked to build. The Admiral's proposal hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Sarah stared at the documents spread across the desk, her mind racing through possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider. For 18 months, her only plan had been to remain invisible, to serve quietly until she could figure out what came next. Now Admiral Thompson was offering something that seemed impossible, a chance to reclaim her identity without sacrificing her safety. I need time to think, Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Thompson nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need, but Elena, she paused, using the name deliberately. You can't keep living half a life forever. Eventually, the weight of hiding who you are becomes heavier than the risks of revealing the truth. That afternoon, Sarah found herself standing at the ship's bow, watching the endless expanse of ocean stretch toward the horizon. The rhythmic sound of waves against the hull had always calmed her, but today it felt like a countdown to an impossible decision. Other crew members moved around her, going about their duties with the comfortable routine she had envied for months. Petty Officer Johnson approached, leaning against the railing beside her. You look like someone stole your favorite wrench. Martinez, everything okay? Sarah managed a weak smile. Just thinking about stuff, you know how it is. Admiral Thompson seems impressed with your work, Johnson continued. Word is she spent extra time reviewing personnel files yesterday. Probably means good things for your career. If only he knew, Sarah thought. Maybe. Hard to tell with admirals. After Johnson moved on, Sarah remained at the rail, her thoughts drifting back to the conversation in Admiral Thompson's office. The Admiral had mentioned protection, official channels, ways to make Elena Vasquez a harder target. But Sarah had learned the hard way that official promises couldn't always prevent unofficial revenge. The metal beneath her shirt felt heavier than usual, pressing against her ribs like a physical reminder of the weight she carried. She thought about the citation that came with it, words about extraordinary courage and selfless devotion to duty. At the time, she had felt like a fraud accepting it. The choice to save those civilians hadn't felt heroic. It had felt like the only thing a decent human being could do. But the consequences of that choice had been severe. Her commanding officer had been relieved of duty. The entire Special Operations Unit had been disbanded. 3 good soldiers had been transferred to different branches to avoid court-martial proceedings. The mission's failure had rippled through intelligence communities like a stone thrown into still water. That evening, Sarah skipped dinner in the mess hall, choosing instead to eat alone in the ammunition bay while she worked on inventory reports. The familiar environment helped her think, surrounded by the tools of warfare that she understood better than most people understood their morning coffee routine. She was deep in concentration when Admiral Thompson appeared in the doorway. The Admiral didn't announce herself, simply entered the bay and began examining the organized storage systems with apparent interest. You know, Admiral Thompson said conversationally, I've been thinking about our conversation today. About the risks. You mentioned the people who might still want revenge. Sarah looked up from her paperwork. Admiral? I did some additional research this afternoon. Made some calls to people who understand these situations better than most. It seems that time has a way of changing priorities, even for people with long memories. Admiral Thompson moved closer, her expression serious but not unkind. The specific individuals who posed the greatest threat to Elena Vasquez have been neutralized by other circumstances. Natural causes, conflicts with their own organizations, changing political situations. The landscape has shifted significantly in the past 18 months. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What are you saying? I'm saying that the danger you've been hiding from may not be as significant as it was when you first disappeared. The intelligence community has ways of monitoring these things, and the assessment is that Elena Vasquez would face minimal risk if she chose to resurface. The news should have been relief, but instead Sarah felt a different kind of fear, the fear of hope. Even if that's true, Admiral, I've built a life here as Sarah Martinez. The crew knows me, trusts me. Revealing the truth would change everything. Yes, it would, Admiral Thompson agreed. But change isn't always bad. The crew would understand that they've been working alongside a genuine American hero. Your knowledge and experience could benefit not just this ship, but the entire Navy. Sarah set down her pen and looked directly at the Admiral. What exactly are you proposing? Admiral Thompson pulled a chair from a nearby workstation and sat down, making their conversation feel less formal. I'm proposing that we find a way to integrate Elena Vasquez's experience with Sarah Martinez's current service. We don't have to announce everything publicly, but we can make sure you receive appropriate recognition and assignment to duties that match your actual capabilities. And the risks. Managed through proper channels, official protection protocols, carefully controlled information release, assignment to duties that keep you in secure environments. We protect our assets, Elena, and you're definitely an asset. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. The life she had built as Sarah Martinez was comfortable and safe, but it was also limiting. She was capable of so much more than ammunition inventory, but revealing those capabilities meant revealing everything else. I need to tell you something, Sarah said finally. The mission that ended Elena Vasquez's career, it wasn't just about saving civilian lives. There was intelligence involved, information that could have prevented other operations, other casualties. My choice to prioritize those civilians meant that intelligence was lost. Admiral Thompson's expression didn't change. I'm aware of the full circumstances. The intelligence assessments concluded that the information loss was regrettable but acceptable given the lives saved. Your actions were reviewed at the highest levels, Elena. The Medal of Honor wasn't awarded lightly. But people died because of missions that failed due to lost intelligence. And people lived because of your direct actions that day. You can't save everyone, Elena. No one can. But you saved the people you could save, and that matters. The conversation continued for another hour, with Admiral Thompson patiently answering questions and addressing concerns that Sarah had carried for years. Slowly, carefully, the Admiral painted a picture of a possible future that Sarah had never dared to imagine. A life where she didn't have to choose between service and honesty, between safety and authenticity. As the evening watch began their duties, Admiral Thompson prepared to leave. I won't pressure you for an immediate decision, but I will ask you to consider this. Sarah Martinez is living a half-life, hiding from possibilities that might not even exist anymore. Elena Vasquez earned the right to serve her country with dignity and recognition. Maybe it's time to find a way to honor both of those truths. After the Admiral left, Sarah remained in the ammunition bay, surrounded by the weapons and supplies she had organized with such care. For the first time in 18 months, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she didn't have to hide who she was, where her experience could be used to help others, where the medal against her chest could be worn with pride instead of concealed in shame. The choice was still terrifying, but for the first time since Elena Vasquez had officially died, Sarah began to believe that resurrection might be possible. 3 days passed before Sarah made her decision. 3 days of sleepless nights, careful observation of her fellow crew members, and quiet conversations with Admiral Thompson about the practical implications of revealing her identity. The Admiral had been patient but persistent, providing additional information that gradually eroded Sarah's reasons for maintaining her deception. On Thursday morning, Sarah requested a meeting with Admiral Thompson and the ship's commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez. She had made her choice, but she wanted to control how the truth was revealed. If she was going to stop hiding, she would do it on her own terms. The meeting took place in Captain Rodriguez's private office, with only the three of them present. Sarah had insisted on strict confidentiality until they could determine the best way to handle the situation. She sat across from both officers, the weight of her hidden medal feeling different now, not like a burden, but like a reminder of who she really was. Captain Rodriguez, Sarah began formally, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels, and it will change everything about how you see me and my service aboard this ship. Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned officer with 15 years of command experience, simply nodded. Admiral Thompson had briefed him on the general situation, though not the specific details. Sarah took a deep breath and began her story. She told them about Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, about the Special Operations Unit that officially never existed, about missions in countries that didn't appear on any public map. She described the operation that had gone wrong, the impossible choice between following orders and saving innocent lives, and the consequences that had followed. The Medal of Honor ceremony took place in a windowless room at the Pentagon. Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. 3 people attended, myself, the Secretary of Defense, and a chaplain. The citation was classified, the decoration was secret, and immediately afterward, Elena Vasquez was declared dead in action. She reached beneath her shirt, and for the first time in 18 months brought the medal into the open. The blue ribbon and distinctive star caught the office light, its inscription clearly visible to both officers. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression shifting from professional interest to genuine awe. My God, Martinez, Elena, this is the Medal of Honor. Do you understand what this represents? I understand what it cost, Sarah replied quietly. Good soldiers lost their careers because of my choice. Operations failed because of intelligence I couldn't provide. People died because missions couldn't proceed as planned. Admiral Thompson spoke up. And dozens of civilians lived because you chose humanity over orders. Elena, you need to understand. That the review process was thorough. Your actions were deemed not just acceptable but exemplary. The Medal of Honor isn't awarded for following orders. It's awarded for demonstrating the highest levels of courage and moral character. Captain Rodriguez stood and walked around his desk, extending his hand to Sarah. It's an honor to serve. With you, Staff Sergeant Vasquez. Or do you prefer your current rank? Sarah shook his hand, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she was carrying. Sarah Martinez has been good to me, Captain. I'd like to find a way to honor both identities. Over the next several hours, the three officers discussed the practical implications of Sarah's revealed identity. Admiral Thompson had already begun working through official channels to create a pathway for Elena Vasquez to resurface without compromising security or safety. The process would be complex but manageable. We'll need to address the crew, Captain Rodriguez said. They deserve to know they've been serving alongside a genuine American hero, but we'll need to be careful about operational security. I'd like to tell them myself, Sarah said. These people have become my family over the past 18 months. They trusted Sarah Martinez, and now I need to earn their trust as Elena Vasquez. Admiral Thompson smiled. I think you'll find that trust transfers more easily than you expect. Good people recognize good people, regardless of names or backgrounds. The shipwide announcement was scheduled for that evening after the day watch had completed their duties. Sarah spent the afternoon in the ammunition bay, not because she had work to do, but because she needed the familiar environment to prepare for what would be the most difficult conversation of her military career. At away, 1900 hours, the ship's entire crew assembled in the main mess hall. Captain Rodriguez introduced Admiral Thompson, who provided context about classified operations and the need for discretion. Then Sarah stepped forward, wearing her dress uniform with the Medal of Honor displayed prominently for the first time. Since that secret ceremony at the Pentagon, the reaction was immediate and emotional. Gasps of recognition, murmurs of awe, and then a spontaneous standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Sarah stood at attention, overwhelmed by the genuine support and respect she saw in the faces of her fellow sailors. When the applause finally died down, Sarah began to speak. For the past 18 months, you've known me as Sarah Martinez, your ammunition specialist and fellow crew member. That person was real. Her dedication to duty, her respect for all of you, her commitment to this ship and its mission. But there were things about Sarah Martinez that weren't entirely true. She told them an abbreviated version of her story, leaving out classified details but explaining the circumstances that had led to her new identity. She spoke about the choice between following orders and saving lives, about the consequences of that choice and about the Medal of Honor that she had hidden for so long. The person standing before you is still the same sailor who has worked alongside you, shared meals with you, and served this ship with pride, Sarah continued. But now you know the full truth about who I am and what I've experienced. I hope that knowledge will strengthen our bond rather than create distance between us. Petty Officer Johnson was the first to respond, standing up from his seat near the front. Staff Sergeant. Sarah, hell, I don't know what to call you now, he said with a grin. But whoever you are, you're still the best ammunition specialist this ship has ever had, and I'm proud to serve with you. The sentiment was echoed throughout the mess hall. One by one, crew members approached Sarah after the formal announcement, shaking her hand, expressing gratitude for her service, and reassuring her that nothing fundamental had changed between them. Chief Petty Officer Williams approached with tears in his eyes. I knew there was something special about you, Martinez. The way you handled equipment, your attention to detail, your natural leadership, it all makes sense now. We're honored to have you aboard. Seaman Rodriguez, one of the younger crew members, looked nervous as he approached. Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for trusting us with the truth. It means a lot that you consider us family enough to share something so personal. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself surrounded by genuine warmth and acceptance. The fears she had carried about rejection and judgment proved unfounded. These sailors understood dedication and sacrifice. They recognized the courage it had taken not just to earn the Medal of Honor, but to continue serving under a new identity. Admiral Thompson observed the interactions with satisfaction. She had seen many classified operations and sensitive revelations during her career, but rarely had she witnessed such positive acceptance of difficult truths. The crew's response validated her belief that Sarah Martinez and Elena Vasquez could coexist successfully. Later that night, after the celebration had wound down and most of the crew had returned to their quarters, Sarah found herself back at the ship's bow where she had made her decision 3 days earlier. But this time she wasn't alone. Admiral Thompson joined her, both women looking out at the moonlit ocean. "How do you feel?" Admiral Thompson asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Lighter," she said finally. "I didn't realize how much energy it takes to maintain a false identity. Being able to be completely honest feels like I can breathe, fully for the first time in 18 months. And the concerns about safety, about revenge? Still there, but manageable now. You were right about the changed circumstances, and having official support makes a significant difference. But more than that, I realized tonight that I was hiding from more than just external threats. I was hiding from myself." Admiral Thompson nodded. "Identity is a complex thing. We are shaped by our experiences, but we don't have to be defined by our worst moments. Elena Vasquez made a difficult choice under impossible circumstances and paid a heavy price for doing the right thing. That's not something to hide from. That's something to build upon." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the stars reflect on the water. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her chest, but now the metal felt different. Not like a hidden burden, but like a bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we work together to figure out how Elena Vasquez can best serve her country moving forward. There are opportunities for someone with your experience and skills, training positions, specialized assignments, leadership roles that could benefit from your unique perspective." Sarah smiled, and for the first time in years it was completely genuine. "I'd like that. I'd like to find..." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, surrounded by portraits of Medal of Honor recipients whose stories could be told publicly. Her own portrait would never hang here. The classified nature of her service guaranteed that Elena Vasquez would remain largely invisible to history, but she had found peace with that reality. Admiral Thompson had kept her promise. Through careful coordination with multiple military branches and intelligence agencies, they had created a unique position that allowed Sarah to serve openly while maintaining necessary operational security. She had been reassigned to a joint task force responsible for training special operations personnel in ethical decision-making under extreme circumstances. The work was challenging and deeply meaningful. Sarah found herself teaching young soldiers how to navigate the impossible choices that came with modern warfare, helping them understand that following orders and maintaining moral integrity weren't always compatible goals. Her own experience, once a source of shame and isolation, had become a powerful tool for preparing others to face similar dilemmas. "The most difficult decisions you'll face won't be tactical," she would tell her students. "They'll be moral. When your orders conflict with your conscience, when saving lives means compromising missions, when doing the right thing means accepting consequences that will follow you for the rest of your career, that's when you'll discover who you really are." Her reputation as an instructor had spread quickly through military training facilities. Officers would request specifically to attend her workshops, drawn by stories of the mysterious teacher who spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through the scenarios she described. They didn't know the specifics of her background, but they recognized authenticity when they heard it. The USS Valiant had become a distant but cherished memory. The crew had remained supportive throughout her transition, and several had written letters of recommendation that helped establish her credibility in her new role. Petty Officer Johnson had even visited once when his ship docked near her training facility, bringing updates about their mutual friends and expressing pride in her continued service. On this particular morning, Sarah was reviewing curriculum for a new training program when Admiral Thompson arrived at her office. The Admiral, now promoted to head the Joint Task Force, made regular visits to check on her most unique instructor. "How are the new recruits?" Admiral Thompson asked, settling into a chair across from Sarah's desk. Eager but naive, Sarah replied with a smile. They think courage means not being afraid. We're working on helping them understand that real courage means being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Sounds familiar? Admiral Thompson gestured toward the Medal of Honor citation that now hung openly on Sarah's office wall. Not the actual medal, which remained classified, but a commemorative certificate that acknowledged her service without revealing operational details. Any regrets about coming forward? Sarah considered the question seriously. None about the truth. Some about the time I wasted hiding from it. I could have been doing this work years ago if I hadn't been so afraid of being seen. Fear is understandable, given what you faced. The important thing is that you eventually found the courage to move beyond it. They discussed upcoming training schedules and policy changes, but their conversation was interrupted by a knock on Sarah's office door. A young lieutenant entered, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Patricia Chen. I'm scheduled for your advanced ethics workshop next month, but I was hoping I could speak with you privately first. Sarah gestured for her to sit. What's on your mind, Lieutenant? Lieutenant Chen took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I was involved in an operation that went badly. Not as badly as it could have gone, no one died. But I had to make a choice between following my orders exactly and protecting civilians who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I chose to protect the civilians, and now I'm facing a formal review of my actions. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, recognizing her younger self in the lieutenant's words. What are you hoping I can tell you? I guess I want to know if I'll ever stop second-guessing myself, if I'll ever know for certain whether I made the right choice. Sarah stood and walked to her window, looking out at the training grounds where young soldiers were learning to become warriors. The uncertainty never completely goes away, she said honestly. But over time, you learn to find peace with the fact that you acted according to your conscience when it mattered most. That has to be enough. Lieutenant Chen nodded, tears visible in her eyes. Thank you, ma'am. It helps to know I'm not the only one who's faced this kind of situation. After the lieutenant left, Admiral Thompson observed Sarah thoughtfully. She reminds you of yourself, doesn't she? Terrifyingly so. I just hope she has better support systems than I did when I was going through the same thing. She does, Admiral, Thompson assured her. She has you, and others like you who understand what she's experiencing. That makes all the difference. As the day wound down, Sarah completed her final administrative tasks and prepared to leave her office. The building would be quiet over the weekend, giving her time to work on a book she had been writing, not for publication, but as a resource for future instructors who might need to help soldiers navigate moral crises in combat situations. Walking. Through the halls of the Pentagon, Sarah passed the public displays honoring military service and sacrifice. Her name would never appear on any of these walls. Her story would never be told in history books, and her Medal of Honor would remain locked away in classified files. But she had found something more valuable than public recognition. She had found purpose that honored both her past and her present. The evening air was crisp as she stepped outside, and Sarah took a moment to appreciate the simple pleasure of walking freely without constantly looking over her shoulder. The fears that had driven Elena Vasquez into hiding had proved largely unfounded. But more importantly, she had learned that running from truth was more exhausting than facing it. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Petty Officer Johnson. Saw your interview in Navy Times. Proud to have served with you, whatever your name is. The ammunition base still hasn't been organized as well since you left. Sarah smiled, remembering the months when her biggest concern had been maintaining perfect inventory records and avoiding personal questions. That life seemed impossibly small now, though she was grateful for the sanctuary it had provided when she needed to heal and rediscover her sense of purpose. As she drove home to her small apartment near the training facility, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from the hidden depths of a naval ammunition bay to her current position as a respected instructor and mentor. The path had been longer and more complicated than she had ever imagined, but it had led her to a place where she could finally serve with complete authenticity. The medal that had once felt like a burden now served as a reminder that the hardest choices often led to the most meaningful outcomes. Elena Vasquez had earned that decoration by choosing humanity over orders, and Sarah Martinez had honored it by choosing truth over safety. Together, they had become someone who could help others face similar crossroads with courage and wisdom. She pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment in the quiet darkness, feeling the weight of the metal against her chest, not heavy anymore but solid and reassuring, like an anchor that kept her connected to the values that had guided her through the darkest moments of her life. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve. And for the first time in years, Sarah was eager to see what came next.